Welcome back to Aggie Pride, a UC Davis football podcast. It's 2026. There's a ton that has taken place since the Ags bowed out of the FCS quarterfinals. This will not be like a full season recap for those who are wanting our postseason awards and Dwight's whiteout shoutouts and all the things. This is, I would say, more of a reaction podcast and a little bit of a preview podcast, because for those who hop on this right away, the FCS National Championship is around the corner. We will talk about that game a little bit, being that we played both teams who are going to be in that game. But the big news of the weekend was that QB1, the freshman sensation, the second place in the Jerry Rice Award, is Caden Pinnick entering the transfer portal, which shocked Aggie Nation. I do want to start with you, Scott Gordon, who's here with Dwight Smith and myself, and just kind of get your take on that event. If you had conversations with anyone beforehand that you feel like you can share, and just kind of like your overall reaction to receiving the news.
Well, I got to be honest. I know they were really high, meaning the coaching staff, Coach Plough, Coach Shelton, the offensive staff on Trainer Cleveland. And they kept talking about how much they liked him. We saw how much he was playing in fall camp. They made him, he's going to be he's the third quarterback behind Grant Harper and Caden Pinnick. And my question was always, how does he going to stay if the starter is a redshirt freshman and he's a true freshman, And I do feel like the coaches felt, well, eventually we're going to lose Caden Pinnick. But I also feel like they thought they were probably going to get another year out of him. Because let's face it, Caden Pinnick had a great freshman year. He's a redshirt freshman. He's a leader. But we also saw him play against the University of Washington. And that's a different level. And I really felt like one more year of seasoning, one more year of Sam Batu, one more year with Stacey Dobbins, one more year with Jordan Fisher. But clearly, we know conversations take place behind the scenes. And let's not forget, just because you go in the portal doesn't mean you're gone. Now, his long post on Twitter certainly seemed, or Instagram, certainly seemed to say, like, thank you, Aggie Nation. You've been great. I'm out, which leads me to think he has a destination in mind. But let's also not forget Noah Fafita, who played quarterback for Arizona, went in the portal last year, opted to come back, took the team to a 9-win season this year. So I firmly think he's gone. I was surprised it happened as quickly as it did. I thought we would get one more year out of him. I thought they brought Trainer Cleveland in knowing that. My first reaction is we had a really deep room, the Aggies did this year, with Caden Pinnick and Grant Harper with almost 6 years of experience. They had David Razor, who was off injured, but at least he could be in the room and help out. And then they were grooming Trainer Cleveland to be the next guy. So what happens now? Well, one, not only did Caden Pinnick go in the portal, David Razor went in the portal, Grant Harper graduates. So now your room went from a ton of experience to you've got Trainer Cleveland with now you've got a whole spring practice and fall plan. They really like him, but behind him, I mean, they got Axel Eason, who they brought in last year. The quarterback they brought in, Xavier, they think they're going to move him to receiver. They brought in a quarterback in this class from Timberline High School in Boise, Idaho. But I mean, Jack Brandt, he's going to be a true freshman. So you went from a position of depth and security to a position of, what are you going to do? And here's the other thing. There's also a February signing period. So let's not forget, everybody focuses on the December signing period. There's also the first Wednesday in February where you can sign high school kids. And with the transfer portal, a lot of teams have held off on scholarships. There might have been a player that they really liked that might not have ended up where they liked. And so I got a lot of faith in Coach Plough and Coach Shelton. And then the last thing I'll say on this, Brock, is, Coach Plough has been very focused on, we're not going to bring a quarterback from the portal. We're going to develop our quarterbacks here. I think eventually that process is going to have to evolve, because you look at Justin Lamson from Sacramento playing for Montana State. I mean, you might find a kid who was a backup at a pretty good school who wants to get his graduate degree at UC Davis, and you just bring him in for depth. Like, you don't make him the starter, but you see a lot of the FBS Power 5 schools do that. I mean, you got Sam Heward going down, who was at Cal Poly, ends up being the third quarterback at USC. So sometimes I just think they're going to have to look at their strategy as a whole. So I'm surprised about Pinnick leaving as quickly as he did, and I'm curious how they address it from going to a position of depth to, a lot of they don't have anybody that started any games
So much
now as
youth.
their 1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
Yes, so much youth. And you talked about the potential shift that will come down the road that Coach Plough might have to do because he has his pitch down, a strong pitch about developing players. But when you don't get a chance to develop players because they leave earlier, not that everyone is, but you left out Damon Reister. He's another talented guy who I always had my eye on, thinking he was going to start, who's in the portal as well. Dwight on our text thread responded to my prediction postseason I said there's a 38% chance Caden Pinnick returns. Dwight was pretty bullish. He's going to be back. Dwight, how did you take the news and what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the calculus, right? And you talk about developing guys. You come in, you have a guy who shows tremendous development over a 11, 10 game season. And it's what spot do you get to at which point you feel like you're ready for the next step. And that's the juggle here. And Plough is clear that it's, hey, this is a 2-3 year kind of get everything you can out of Davis, get that degree, and then take your talents elsewhere. Other guys are going to have different calculus with that. And so I think ultimately looking at Caden's note, it comes down to that calculus that he did with his family and the people around him, and the opportunities for great quarterback play at different levels. You look at what Trinidad Chambliss did going to Ole Miss, and you look at that type of quarterback prototype, and you say, hey, reminds me of a guy. And, so that it did surprise me. I think I was really hopeful that we get another year. Scott, to your point, getting some key pieces coming back to take another run at this thing. But, guys are going to have to look at the window. Like, what's the window of opportunity, and what's the best play for my career, and the opportunities I have to advance my education, advance my family, quite frankly. And so, no hard feelings against Caden whatsoever. It's obviously a difficult decision to have to make at that kind of tender age. You think about the decisions I was making at 18 and 19, and they didn't quite have this level of significance. But it does leave some questions, and leaves big questions for me around that room. Obviously, to your point, Scott, a lot of excitement about the talent that's bursting out of that room, and guys that you think Plough. You look at a Mitch Dixon, you look at guys that got moved around and were able to have successful careers. So I was surprised to see the news, but as others on the Instagram comments have said, maybe not. Maybe disappointed, I would say, but not surprised, because this is the landscape we're navigating right now.
Dwight, not to interrupt, but just two things pop into mind. It almost reminds me of basketball in the NCAA. If you actually graduate, the NBA won't touch you because they figured if you were good enough already, you would have left early. That whole one and done thing in basketball. And had dinner with a family whose son went to Jesuit, went to Wyoming. He was on the travel squad this year. He's got a chance to start. I'm sitting across from his mom at dinner, and she was explaining to me that he could make $500,000 if he transfers to another school and goes place. $500,000 is a lot of money. And if I have zero issues, and there's a lot of changes that are happening. Let's face it, they went from 2 portals to 1. Now, if you opt into the House decision, there's a salary cap, $20.5 million. So I think people are moving quicker now because they're playing under the current rules, as opposed to, I don't want to wait and see if something changes. Let's face it, when I played at Arizona, if you transfer to another FBS school, you had to sit out a year. If you went to an FCS school, you could stay. So I think people are moving now because they see this is just untenable long term with a constant movement that's happening. The other thing I'd say is, I've talked to David Razor. Obviously, you guys know I'm high on him. I saw him play in high school at Corona Del Mar. He puts himself in the portal. Damon Reister puts himself in the portal. Caden Pinnick puts himself in the portal. But what if David Razor, who's got 3 years of eligibility left, says, that room just changed a lot. I might want to get my degree at UC Davis. I might want to play with Trainer Cleveland. And because we all know two guys are going to play the way these guys play, and maybe I finish, get my degree, play a season, and then I have 2 years to go play somewhere else. Like maybe his calculus changes. Maybe Damon Reister's calculus changes. So we don't know what's going through their mind and what's going to happen. But I do think the way things are evolving and changing, and in my opinion, the way the NCAA has completely missed the boat and has a completely unregulated system. I mean, let's face it, we need a commissioner. We need a scheduling commissioner. We need a NIL commissioner. We need a commissioner for a lot of things. So I'm curious to see what the calculus is for the guys who put themselves in the portal before Caden did, who might want to get their degree from Davis. Does it change what they do? So we'll see.
Yeah, it's an interesting room, and I think people want it. You know, there were a lot of Instagram comments, and people wanted to. Justin Feebick was like, "Give us a breakdown of the 2026 quarterback room," which is naturally we've kind of already done that a little bit, but it is a fascinating room, and it's the preeminent premier position for any program, but especially this school. This school has the quarterback lineage. We always talk about that. We have a quarterback centric head coach who literally played quarterback here. It's not like when Ron Gould was the coach. It was like when Bob Biggs was the coach. And so it does kind of deserve this type of attention, because what your quarterback provides for a program is more important than almost anything. And so, you know, my first response, and I went on my personal account and was like, "Hey, it's Trainer Cleveland time," because, you know, Scott, when I ran into you at a preseason practice in August, that was one of the first things that jumped out to like my untrained quarterback eye, is like that guy. That guy is standing out to me. And so you mentioned that at that practice. What did that bring to mind for you?
Oh, I mean, a couple things is Tim Plough's been the head coach for 2 years, and we had Miles Hastings have a Hall of Fame type year. And then you have the freshman of the year in the Big Sky at quarterback. He's a phenomenal quarterback coach. I mean, that's why I think you might want to look at that mindset of I'm not taking anybody on a transfer basis, because some really smart, good kid might go, I would like to go learn from that guy from 2 years because he knows what the heck he's doing. Look what he did in 2 years. Also, look when he was the OC, Jake Mayer. He's playing in the CFL. He set records. So he knows what he's doing. So the very first practice I went to, I was looking to see who the 1, 2, and 3 were. And obviously, number one, the competition was between Grant Harper and Caden Pinnick, but everyone kept saying, look at this Trainer Cleveland guy. And I saw him go in on 7-on-7. I saw them put him in a scrimmage and make it live and watched him run. I've talked to Coach Shelton about it. He's like, he's one of the best quarterbacks we've ever recruited here, even having Caden Pinnick in the room. And that was my question. Why would you recruit that position so heavy with such a young, good quarterback? And he said, well, I don't think we're going to have Caden forever. So they are very high on Trainer Cleveland. And if you think about the 2 games they put him in, Montana State, they run a trick play with him. He gets 2 completions against the University of Washington. What they're going to have to do is, he's a very different personality than Caden Pinnick. Caden is a cool as a cucumber, almost too calm, extremely confident. I think Trainer's extremely confident, but I remember him jogging off the field after his first 7-on-7. He's like, man, my nerves are all over the place, but he looked fantastic. Like he was 3 for 5 on his throws. So this is where Tim puts his arm around him and says, hey, this is your ship to drive, just like he did with Miles Hastings. And he's got a full spring and a full fall. I just personally think it would be great if they could get a guy like David Razor to come back out, who's been around, who knows the signals, who could be in the room and sit with him. And also, if there's a moment, hey, Razor, go run a couple series for us. We have that, but we might not get that opportunity. But that's where I'd be very curious what his calculus is. But I'm excited about him. He's big. He's physical.
He's thick.
I mean, he runs like a house. He's thick. Obviously, his dad played in the NFL. His dad was an All-American tight end at Washington. His brother's an offensive lineman. I mean, he's got a strong football lineage. And I think he came to Davis for a reason, because he wanted to be coached by one of the best quarterback coaches on the West Coast.
Dwight, I want to shift it back to you with like kind of this FCS. You mentioned Trinidad Chambliss, which is a fascinating story of like the D2 goes to Ole Miss and dear Lord, we're all rooting for Ole Miss. We get it. Every listener right now, you're rooting for Ole Miss. We know the reasons why. Bless those kids' heart. But what are we looking at? And this is some more philosophical, high level stuff, but like FCS football, this almost gray area of college football. The NCAA still runs our playoff system, unlike the FBS, which is named after bowls. Fancy that. And so we're still actually being governed more so by the NCAA, which is, I don't know if that's a positive or negative. How is like the current state of college football in terms of like preparing men is something, and the reason why I'm kind of asking this question, and I'll finish it and flesh it out, is like I was listening to the Big Sky Breakdown and they're previewing, which we'll give our little score predictions on, the FCS National Championship coming up. And obviously Big Sky or Skyline Sports, who produces that podcast and a lot of the radio show with the Nuanez brothers up there, like they're very Montana centric, so they're into the Bobcats, but they're like, what is this teaching our men? And that's why I want your thoughts, Dwight, because from what I've gathered and what I've read, and I don't know Caden that well, he has a single mom who raised him, from what I read online. That could be wrong. And like, this is an opportunity for a payday. And I don't know what his upbringing was necessarily like, but the comment that I read insinuated like, hey, this could really benefit his life. Think about his personal life, people. It's not just about him being disloyal or, because some people are like, oh, he's disloyal, he's leaving after 1 year. So getting back to the question though, it's like, what is NIL, transfer portal, current college football landscape doing to men? Like, is this a positive thing for Caden, Dwight? Or is this like, oh man, he's learning crappy life lessons and getting too much opportunity right away? You've been in senior staff at UC Davis. You've helped a lot of different groups of people from a sociological perspective throughout your professional career. Like, what do you make of the 30,000-foot view impact on men with the NIL and transfer portal?
Yeah, I think getting back to Scott, what you said about like the lack of regulation and kind of folks accelerating their decision-making processes to stay ahead or whatever, whatever they're thinking. I think the biggest piece for me is providing young men, young athletes, an informed choice, right? And so that's really about the support that's around them, the education necessary, the understanding of the options and the implications of different pathways. I am not confident that level of kind of support has caught up to the Wild West that we're in right now. And so that's my concern for young men at the 18 to 22 kind of brain stage in making some of these decisions because, there are implications. There are financial implications. There's tax implications. There's all kinds of real life implications that if you don't have the right people in your corner can end up, kind of being something that you come to regret. And so I'm not saying that's Caden's situation. I'm just saying from having worked in athletic advising, from having worked with young folks trying to make decisions from, do I change my major to like, what career do I want to go, field do I want to go down? You really want to make sure they have an informed choice, an informed menu of options, and an understanding of the implications. So it comes down to things like the Aggie Evo program, which is really about getting student athletes prepared for that next stage, understanding basic skills like financial literacy, other things like that I think we're fortunate to have at Davis, but I don't think has caught up to the rate of evolution within the FCS or at the Division I level. So that would be my one concern is, are you making a 400 meter decision on a marathon track? And so, I think that, like Plough has said, kids got to make the right decision for their family. You have the young man who went to Pitt, got to play in a bowl game, I believe, and
Jameer Baines, yeah.
and so it's a big decision. You get to continue your education and get a payday that can have legs that take you, into whatever it is, a debt-free next stage of life or whatever it might be. And so I think that there's a real opportunity to give young men skills they're going to need as they move beyond their athletic careers. But I think there's a risk that we're missing that opportunity. So my hope is that, and I have confidence that, Caden and his team are making a really calculated decision here. But I do have concern for the young men out there who are racing to make a decision. And, it's like my dad used to tell me, measure twice, cut once, and so you don't want to make that cut before you know where that log is going to fall. So,
Dwight, if I can, imagine if you're Jaden Rashada. You leave Pittsburgh High School as one of the top quarterbacks. Florida, your deal doesn't go through. You go to ASU, and then you get beat out there. Then you go to Georgia. Then you end up transferring to Sacramento State, and you get beat out there. I mean, Cardell Williams is the starter. So what happens there? I feel very strongly about this. What makes me absolutely sick is when I see Kansas State have 7 wins but not be able to field a bowl team, or Iowa State, when their coaches leave, they only have 17 scholarship players. So I'm watching Rice at 5-7 play Texas State. The opt-outs, it is. You made some great points, Dwight. The one thing I would say is I think I read Kirk Herbstreit's book. I don't know if you guys have read it. It's phenomenal. But he was a 5-star recruit to Ohio State. And his first year, he didn't make the travel team. The second year, they tried to move him to DB. The third year, they put him on kickoff cover. His fourth year, so he's a redshirt junior, he starts a couple games. And he writes, I didn't start until my redshirt senior year. And we went 10-3. I had 8 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He goes, if I played today, I would have transferred 3 times. But he's like, I got a therapist and I worked through some mental things. I became tougher. I got grit. I'm a better husband. I'm a better father. Now, that's him saying indirectly, you got to fight a little bit. And it also, every year, these college coaches have to re-recruit their kids. And given the system that we have now, I get it. Like if I was playing now, but think about Chuba Mawai, plays from Long Beach Poly. UC Davis's scholarships do not give costs of tuitions. He's sleeping on somebody's couch. University of Arizona comes in and says, we'll pay you a couple $100,000 a year. We'll fly your mom in to the games. We'll give you tickets. Like, that's great. For a kid like that, I think this system is phenomenal. But what are we teaching the other guys, like the Jaden Rashadas of the world, who when you don't get exactly what you want, you're on your 5th school and you've been in college 3 years? What's going to happen when seriously, when you become a husband and a father and get a job? I'm not taking personal shots at the kid. I'm just saying,
sure,
you have that issues going on all the time. So,
well, and that is the point. And for those who don't know, like Jaden Rashada, guess what he did? He did enter the transfer portal again yesterday. And so it's like, I know the kid's journey from when he was in high school too. And like I've said this on the pod before, like I love Pittsburgh High School. I love the tradition of that school, the history of the school. I love the Pittsburgh community. The company that I work for, the company that I work for in my big boy job is based in Pittsburgh now. Like it's a cool town, and it's a unique program. And he transferred to Pittsburgh, even though he was born and raised in Pittsburgh. He went in high school. The point is not to like the point is what is this doing to men though? And the word you used, both of you, was resilience. And resilience is not formed through artificial intelligence. And I use AI a lot. I do. And it can be a tool like anything, but tools can be used for good and bad things, as we know. And so resilience is the thing that comes to mind with men, is like, do we have the resilience? Do we have the toughness to make decisions when times are hard, to stick with it. And that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned first person going to college in my family was stick to activity, if that's a word. Like sticking to it and
Yeah.
finishing it and getting the community and the network and the support. And it's why Taylor Sloat called me to talk about how do we get more Davis football players involved yesterday on a Saturday. It's like, it's the network, it's the ability to fight through something with someone. And can you do that on a 1-year basis with someone when you transfer to Ole Miss from Ferris State? Yes. Trinidad prays with his mom before every game, and he had 3 of the most insane plays on that drive back to back to back. It was so fun to watch. And that is kind of the double-edged sword of this. One of the best days of the year for me was New Year's Day, and it was watching the college football playoff not put on by the NCAA and watching all this collection of talent from all over the country who transfer into these schools. And Indiana, which
Yep.
probably doesn't have more talent than Oregon, although I think they'll be favored and they should. They look like the best team by far. Like they do have a collection of transfer portal talent, and they might not be the same NFL freaky guys that Oregon has, but it's like we like watching that. That is the money aspect of it. That is like you're not aware that, hey, us watching this, all the advertising dollars going towards the college football playoff, that is the sneaky thing that's also promoting this behavior. And I'll pivot to this. An article posted by inform.com highlighted Caden already and Braden Atkinson, who was the award winner of the Jerry Rice Award. He's Anthony Soto's second string quarterback who ended up taking over after we lost to Mercer a couple weeks later, who balled out for Mercer. He's in the portal as well. So Coach Soto's got to figure out what to do next at Mercer as well. They're both sources say being offered $350,000 to $500,000 range, according to this article. And so you have that side of things, and yet you also have the Chubba Ma'es who are in a AT&T commercial side of things. And so I'm going to pivot it back to UC Davis for a second. We have a grad transfers who've played a prominent role last year in our program. And we also, so there's that side of like, we're also doing this a little bit. That's a different way, making, having the Masters of Management program. But how is Coach Plough, and you've alluded to it a little bit earlier, Scott, psychologically doing now that Pinnick, Vargas already did it during the season? The whole injury thing is interesting. Doing psychologically with this decision, and what is he thinking psychologically about how am I going to stay here and build this program through grad transfers, through the portal, through development? Maybe we'll start with you, Scott, and then finish with Dwight before we hit on the Natty.
Real quick, what I'd also say is all this stuff starts in high school. I mean, Philip Bell for Christian Brothers has a great year as a freshman. Then he goes down to St. John Bosco. Matt Leiner's son's gone to 4 different high schools in 4 years, and he has a full ride offer to UNLV. So I think as a coach, backing this up to your question, what were they like in high school? What are the parents like? Because you recruit the family. Am I going to get these guys for a long period of time? I mean, I had the pleasure of sitting next to Cole Batson's parents, who he went to school in Orange County, same school that Sam Darnold went to, was the MVP of that team, goes to Boston College, stays there for 4 years. Then he comes out here for a year, and he picked Davis because he's a great kid who wanted to go to a really good academic school and also wanted a chance to win a championship. So what I think Coach Plough has done, and Jacob Syke and David Meyer and Kalani Riddick, Tico Riddick, they've done a great job of identifying kids that have done a really good job where they are and then brought them in. Nate Ruchina comes in this year and plays middle linebacker, smart kid from Cal, was at Cal for a number of years. He wasn't ping-ponging around the country. They said, all right, we'll bring you in here for a year. So I think what they do is they look at Jacob Syke, another great example, was really, really good at Harvard. Did he ping pong around the country? No. I think Tim is looking for kids, young men who have a track record of being stable, who want to come here for 1 extra year and make a strong impact. And I give, Matt Coombs and Paul Shelton, I give the staff a lot of credit in identifying the right kids who want to come to UC Davis for 1 year, the David Myers of the world. Again, not hopscotching across the country. David Portisano, when they go get linemen from Stony Brook, they're looking for continuity because they realize they can also not offer $250,000 or $500,000 for these players, but what they can do is offer them a phenomenal opportunity to play for a program where you're going to get better, you're going to get watched. They were on national TV for 4 games, and they're on every other week when there's a game, whether it's on local ESPN or not. But what they've done is they've picked kids who have a track record of stability and then bring them on, and they come in and they immediately become leaders. And so that's where I think his philosophy has been. And I think you got to look at, and I'll cede to Dwight here in a second, I promise. What did they do in high school? Stacey Dobbins was at St. John Bosco. He stayed there. A lot of these kids that we brought in, Camp Totten came in. He was at Folsom for the whole time. A kid like Trainer Cleveland's a great example. His talent level for Jesuit High School in Portland, Oregon was way higher. He could have transferred to another school and another spot with his arm strength and talent, but he stayed 4 years, graduated, comes to Davis. I think that is what Tim's philosophy is and how he's going to play it. But Dwight, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think that's it, Scott. And, I think not reading Coach Plough's mind, but saw his tweets, shortly before this announcement. To me, that says, listen, I'm going to give you proof of concept, right? So, he put out this kind of his calculus of come, get developed, get everything you can out of this, bring some guys in for maximal impact in a year, grad transfers, and then you go do what you got to do. I think it's time for us to show that actually works. And I think we're along the path there. And I think Coach is going to feel a lot of confidence with that, even with the disappointment of Caden, with that announcement and other announcements. It's, look, we're gonna, and we have to talk about how to get past quarterfinal week. But I mean, if you're showing that this math works, that we can develop guys, that we can build a team that can compete for a national championship in the playoffs, that's going to be the light that attracts the bugs to it, right? That's going to bring people to it at all stages, at the early high school stage, at the end of my career, looking for that grad degree stage. And so I think, this is a moment for Coach Plough to really double down and push his chips to the middle of the table and say, hey, I believe this works. We're going to show you that it works. And if you want to come be a part of it, be a part of it. And we want to support you as long as you're a part of it and set you up for whatever's next. So that's where I feel he's probably at.
But let's face it, he's probably got the biggest challenge he's ever had, though, because he inherited Miles Hastings, who he recruited. He brought in Caden Pinnick and obviously had Grant Harper there. This will, to me, over the next month, does he go get another quarterback in the February signing period? Do they try to reapproach a David Razor or Damon Reitzer to come back? They've got to figure out a way to build some depth, because this is the first time to me that they're going into a season with, and I have, you guys know this, I have all the confidence in the world in Tim Plough. I think he's a phenomenal head coach, cerebral guy. But how do they approach this? Because the quarterback room, which is his room, just got gutted. And so we'll learn a lot in the next month.
Yeah, and that's where I think the call to I was just going to say that's the call that he has been really consistent with to the alumni community, to fans of UC Davis, like, help me be able to do this. Help me be able to make the moves that we need to make to show that this works. And so I think he's going to be able to use this, I would imagine, to say, hey, let's up the level of our ability from a resource perspective to really compete in this environment. Because look at what can happen. And are we prepared? Do we have a plan B? Do we have a plan C? Right. So I completely agree. And I think the next couple months are gonna answer some of those questions for us.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting. I kind of teased this. I talked to Taylor Slope for a while, who's involved in the Aggie Football Fund, which is a collective of UC Davis football for those who want to get involved, you can go to aggiefootballfund.com. But just being former players, like, and having families and having financial responsibilities and living in dear Lord California, where things are more than a dollar. Um, investing in a college football program or investing in players where a player could leave after a year, that's like a really hard family decision, just like putting my cards on the table. I mean, Dwight and I and many other people, Taylor Sloat and Scott Gordon, like we devote a lot of our resources to this program, time, talents, and so on. And yet, like the ask for financial resources is something that has to take place. Like, money helps things function well, and without it, there's no beautiful football facility that we got to watch practice on together, Scott. There's no 10,000 square foot weight room, and like the Bruce Edwards of the world, like, carry a very heavy load of that. Um, but like, figuring out the way to pitch it to people is really important, because money is a tricky topic, and like, in a lot of different organizations. And so the way you talk about money, the way you try to raise money, and I was in crowdfunding for over a decade, so I actually do get this. Like, it's a really important and sensitive subject.
Yeah.
And yet, like, you want the team to succeed. You want players to succeed. You want players to get compensation if they can. Like, I love Chuba going to Arizona, and I loved when I saw him on that AT&T commercial that was on prominent networks, national networks. Like, that's a really cool story. And yet, that's not everything either. Like, money is not the biggest thing either. We talk about the network and stuff like that. And so we will finish real quick with the FCS National Championship. And I want to position it in two, like, one, just your open-ended thoughts on the game. We saw both of these teams live and in person. And also, like, is there anything that can be gleaned or learned from these rosters, from each program's kind of organization? You got two very different teams, like Montana State, one of the blue bloods, one of the big fan bases. They have multiple collectives. They have season ticket holder wait lists, that sort of thing. And then you have Illinois State, who they went to the 2014 national championship, almost beat North Dakota State then. Brock Spack has been there a long time, but big upset. And they're on the national stage. They had a lot of guys come back and choose to stay, the Daniel Sobkowitz of the world. Dwight, we'll start with you. Just thoughts on the game overall, and like, is there any one lesson that you feel like we can learn from each of these teams, like organizational structure?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one to tune into, but because of what you said of the what could have beens here. But I think that you do have two really different models. And you've got kind of the tough knuckles, Illinois State, kind of Brock Spack way, which he seems like a really cool dude. It's like a guy that I would have loved to be coached by. Love his wry sense of humor, and he seems like a really cool guy. And his group that obviously built a lot of belief in that program and pushed it out of belief into the confidence that comes from knocking off a 1 seed that they've ridden all the way into the championship game. And then you've got kind of Vegan and his train, right, that they've set up there at Montana State. And so it'll be interesting to watch the game. And I think from a lessons perspective, I don't know. I think we kind of have to chart our course, Brock, and kind of that's where I'm at with, like, what's the Davis, not the Davis way, but the Davis formula. And it's gotten us to a certain point. We've obviously fallen short the last 2 years, but it seems like it has a lot of potential to get us 1-2 more games into December and then into January. And it feels like we're right there. A couple of things go the other way, and we're heading out to Nashville. So I'm not looking at this from a lessons perspective. I think it'll be a moment in the FCS that gives us a sense of where things are going, which types of programs are able to have sustained success. But I think we have to just stay super focused on, what our method is, and get that proof of concept, like I said earlier. So that's where I'm sitting with it, Scott. But what do you got?
Well, first of all, I absolutely love both coaches. There's some other coaches in the conference, let's just say, that I'm not a fan of. So Brent Vegan's a class act. He does his press conference with a suit. He treats everybody with a ton of respect. The only difference to me is I really feel like UC Davis lost to Illinois State because they could not finish in the red zone. 5 trips, 2 of those trips coming up with no points, 1 of those trips coming up with a field goal. And also because their defensive line, the injuries, just Sam Gologowski was out, Jacob Syke was out, and you end up losing 42-31. I really like Brock Spack, and I think, look at Tommy Rittenhouse as a guy that went there, their quarterback, sat for a couple years, was a starter. He got pulled from the Davis game last year, threw 5 interceptions against North Dakota State, but played great against UC Davis. I just look at Montana State, and the only real difference, obviously, they got Julius Davis, they got Adam Jones at running back, they got Taco Dollar, Caden Dollar. Those are guys they've developed, and yes, those are guys they've paid through collectives to stay there. The biggest difference is their quarterback, Tommy Mellott, who was a developed player, got drafted in the 3rd round by the Raiders. They did take in a transfer quarterback in Justin Lamson, and he is a dual threat. And it feels like they dropped in a smart kid who had played at Stanford, who understood what they were trying to do. But really, I still think, having watched both teams live, that the margin for error against Montana State is so thin. The Aggies had to play a perfect game, and they played their guts out and fought with them. I also think you got to go back to Carter Vargas's injury against Idaho State. I don't think the Aggies were the same in the red zone for the rest of the season. That's just my humble opinion, and that hurt them as the season went on in the red zone. I personally think Montana State has across the board a better team. I think Illinois State had the biggest win, but let's face it, you're not going to be able to throw 5 interceptions like Tommy Rittenhouse did against North Dakota State and survive against Montana State. Their defense is a lot better than people realize, but the Aggies could move it on them. I mean, they got 31 points. They had a ton of yards. They just couldn't finish in the red zone. And I do think Montana State's defense is better than Villanova's, than UC Davis's when they faced them, because they weren't healthy. I mean, they were throwing in bodies at defensive back and putting in guys that were special teams players to rush the passer. Montana State doesn't do that. They get pressure with 4. They have the defensive player of the year in the Big Sky and Caden Dollar, who's fantastic. They have a great special teams lineup. Illinois State's a great story. You went on the road at Southeast Louisiana. You went on the road at North Dakota State. You went on the road at UC Davis. You went on the road at Villanova. But let's face it, I still think if the Aggies found a way to win, they could have beat Villanova too. But the rematch against Montana State is still Montana State. They are still the apex. I think they're the favorite in the game, and I think they're going to end up winning by 7 to 10 points.
Yeah, I won't touch on the game too much. I mean, I definitely agree with you in that Montana State's the favorite. They were the better team last year against North Dakota State. I've talked about it before. Sometimes the mystique of a program, and North Dakota State has had that for a lot of years. That's why this year's upset by the Redbirds was so shocking, is probably the number one reason in my mind why Montana State couldn't get by them last year. It's just the Bobcats were a better team. They just came out slow. They were tight. They made some mistakes. And then once they finally found their footing, they looked like themselves. And then they started to roll, and it just kind of ran out of time at the end of that one. So I'm definitely predicting a Montana State win. I think it's going to be like a 17-point victory, honestly. I think Illinois State got really hot, and I think they had a gunslinger who was just chucking it around, and then Victor Dawson was able to wear us out. But I don't think Sopkowitz is going to do that this time around. I think there's been a lot of time to prepare. The difference between you're playing every 7 days or 6 days in some cases in the FCS playoffs to then you get that 15-day break. I do think that equalizes the momentum, or I should say like neutralizes momentum, and gives coaching staffs who are maybe better more time to prepare. We see it year in and year out with Plough, who always wins out of the bye and that sort of thing. I want to say in finishing that just, we are going to be doing a lot this off season. Hopefully we're always like TBD, but for those who enjoy listening, feel free to reach out. And I think the ask is we're looking for stories. Pinnick in the portal is a story, and not just stories about like someone's on-field success. So we tried last year to focus on an alumni perspective. I think this year you'll see us do that again. So if there are any alumni who are doing interesting things or not doing interesting things, or who've overcome a lot of adversity, speaking of resilience, like we really want to tap into that. We also want to tap into multi-generational stuff. So I know we have a lot of folks in their 60s and 70s who listen to the podcast. Like if you have people from your generation who you feel like, hey, you guys should have this person on. I've already been receiving information and contact information from folks like, hey, you should reach out to this person. They're doing concussion research and so on and so forth. So feel free to reach out to us. You can go to AggiePridePodcast.com, and the contact us form has our information on there and our email. And then also I would just finish with, the high level stories of like college football, which is what we really dug into today, is something else we're interested in. Just landscape of Big Sky Conference and conference realignment and FBS versus FCS. Those are the things that I know a lot of the listeners are interested in. So Scott and Dwight, thanks for joining. If you guys have like a 30-second final word that you really wanted to get out, go for it. And if not, we can say sayonara, but I just figured I'd give you guys one more chance in case there was something on your mind.
No, I really enjoy talking to you both. I think the timing is great. I do think the pendulum of the universities had all the money and then it went to the players. I think the cat's out of the bag, and I'm very curious to see what happens in the next year or two as some regulations come into things. We've already seen changes with the transfer portal. I think there's going to be changes for number of times you can transfer. I think there's going to be changes to the dollar amounts, things like that. I'm happy for kids, like you said. Trinidad Chambliss is exactly why I think the transfer portal was created. Chuba Mawai is another guy. But I think the reason you have so many kids going in now is they know there's going to be changes, and I think they're just going to come one year after another. And I'm excited to see what Tim Plough and the UC Davis coaching staff does in the next month to fill out their roster with transfers and also quarterbacks, and then we'll be on to spring ball.
Yeah, that about says it for me. I mean, we'll see what happens. It's just the season outside of the season has begun. And so we'll be looking at the breaking news and excited to see how the program's momentum can continue over these next couple months into a feasible plan for a return to football in December in the next campaign. And so excited to be along on that journey with all of our listeners, and appreciate you, Scott, and Brock for keeping us rolling.
All right. Thanks, guys. Go Ags.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Scott.